The night was heavy with rain, and the city glowed with strange neon lights. The human man walked slowly through the narrow streets, his gray hoodie torn and his body tired. He was a stranger here, in an alien world where every sign and every face reminded him that this was not Earth. He had come to trade, to survive, nothing more. But destiny had already chosen something different for him. At the corner of a dark alley, he heard a cry. It was not the sound of a grown warrior, not the shout of a soldier. It was small, soft, filled with fear. He turned his head and saw a little alien girl, her skin glowing faintly blue under the rain, her bright white hair clinging to her face. She was no more than a child, trembling, pressed against the metallic wall. In front of her stood 3 attackers, their blades shining under the neon glow. Their armor was dark, their voices sharp. They shouted at the child in a language the human could not understand, but fear was universal. He could see it in the way the child's hand shook, in the way her eyes searched for help. For a single moment he hesitated. He was just a man, no soldier, no hero. Why should he risk his life for someone he did not even know? But as he saw the first attacker raise his blade, something inside him moved. His body acted before his mind could stop it. He ran forward, his boots splashing in the puddles, his arms spread wide. He pushed the child behind him with one hand, and with the other, he tried to shield her small body. The attackers were shocked for only a second, but that second was enough. The blade that was meant for the child's heart struck him instead. Pain burned through his chest, his breath caught. The second attacker slashed at his side, the third stabbed deep into his shoulder. The man gritted his teeth, refusing to fall, refusing to move away. He stood firm, taking strike after strike. 8 stabs in total, each one burning like fire. The child screamed, her voice echoing in the alley. She reached for him, her small hands pulling at his torn hoodie. Her glowing tears fell onto his skin, mixing with the rain. He wanted to tell her to run, to escape, but his voice was broken. His strength was fading fast. The attackers pulled back, staring at him with disbelief. This was not their plan. No human should have stood against them. No man should have resisted this much. They looked at each other uncertain. For the first time, fear flashed in their alien eyes. The man's knees finally gave way. He dropped to the wet ground, his vision blurring. The neon signs above him stretched into glowing rivers of light. He could barely see the child now, but he felt her presence near. He felt her hand clutching his, small and desperate. In those final moments, his thoughts were simple. He had no great words, no great regrets. He had lived a life of quiet survival, and now he had given it for something pure, for innocence, for a child who should not die tonight. The rain fell harder, washing the blood from his torn clothes. His chest rose and fell weakly. His body shook, but his eyes softened when he looked once more at the child. She was alive, she was safe, that was enough. Darkness closed around him slowly like a door shutting against the world. His breath grew shallow, his heartbeat slowed. Yet, as his vision faded, he thought he saw something strange. Figures in shining armor at the far end of the alley, their eyes glowing, their silhouettes tall and powerful, watching in silence. The man blinked, not knowing if it was real or a dream. He wanted to ask who they were, but the words never came. The last thing he felt was the child's small hand still holding his, refusing to let go. Then everything went black. But destiny was not finished with him. The story will. As only beginning, the man opened his eyes slowly. His chest rose with a sharp breath as if the world itself had pushed life back into him. His vision was blurred, the lights above him too bright. His body felt strange, weightless, almost not his own. He tried to sit up, but gentle hands pressed against his shoulder. He turned his head and saw her, the alien child, alive, safe. Her glowing blue skin shimmered softly in the pale light. Her bright white hair framed her face. Her small hand clutched his torn hoodie, refusing to let go. "You are awake," she whispered in a trembling voice, though he barely understood the words. Somehow he felt their meaning deep inside. Her wide eyes were filled with relief, but also fear. The man looked around. He was not in the alley anymore. He was inside a chamber unlike anything he had seen. The walls pulsed with light as if they were alive. Strange machines surrounded him, tubes glowing with energy. He realized he was lying on a bed of crystal, and where his wounds had been, only faint scars remained. His chest no longer burned. His body was whole. He touched his side in disbelief. He had taken 8 blades, he had felt death itself, yet here he was, breathing again. At the far side of the chamber, 2 tall figures stood. They wore armor that gleamed like liquid silver. Their helmets covered their faces, but their glowing eyes watched him closely. The man felt their gaze heavy on his soul. He shifted uncomfortably, his human instincts screaming that these were no ordinary guards. The child squeezed his hand tighter, as if telling him not to be afraid. One of the armored figures stepped forward. His voice was deep, echoing through the chamber, though the man could not understand the alien tongue. The child quickly spoke back, her voice sharp, protective. The armored figure paused, then lowered his head slightly. The man frowned. Why would warriors bow to a child, and why did they watch him with such caution? He struggled to speak, his voice cracked. Why am I alive? He asked. His words sounded weak, but the question burned in his mind. He had felt the end. He had embraced it, and yet something had dragged him back. The child looked at him, her glowing tears still fresh on her cheeks. She whispered softly, "Because you saved me." Her words confused him more than they answered. Saved her, yes. But at what cost? Why was she so important that strangers in silver armor stood guard? Why was he here in this place that healed wounds no human medicine could? The chamber door suddenly hissed open. The sound made the air tremble. The man turned his head, and his heart froze. More figures entered, not just guards, soldiers. They marched in perfect discipline, their boots striking the crystal floor like thunder. Their armor was heavier, darker, etched with alien symbols. Their weapons gleamed with energy the man could not even describe. At the front was one unlike the others, taller, broader, his armor glowing faintly gold. His steps were slow, heavy with authority. The guards in silver lowered their heads as he entered. Even the child straightened, her glowing eyes wide. The man's chest tightened. He knew power when he saw it, and this was no ordinary soldier. This was a commander. The commander stopped only a few steps away from the bed, his glowing eyes locked onto the human. For a long moment, the chamber was silent, the sound of rain outside distant, muffled. Then the commander spoke, his voice deep like rolling thunder. The words were alien, yet the weight of them pressed on the man's chest. The child quickly translated, her voice trembling. He says the soldiers are here. Because of you. The man blinked, his heart pounding. Because of me, he whispered. His mind raced. He was just a man, a wanderer. No weapon, no army. Why would alien soldiers stand at his door? The commander raised his hand, slowly forming a fist across his chest. The soldiers behind him moved in unison. Their armor clashed, their boots struck the ground together. Then in perfect order, they lowered their heads. They were saluting him. The man froze. His heart pounded louder than the rain outside. This was madness. He was no hero, no leader. He had only saved a child. That was all, wasn't it? But deep inside he felt it. Something larger was moving. Something far beyond his understanding. Something that began the moment he shielded that little girl with his broken human body. The chamber lights pulsed brighter. The soldiers remained still. The child's small hand still held his, and for the first time he saw not just fear in her eyes, but hope. The man swallowed hard. He did not know what destiny had written for him, but as the alien soldiers bowed to him, he realized one truth. His life was no longer his own. The human sat in silence, his mind spinning like a storm. He had awoken from death itself, healed by alien hands, and now soldiers in strange armor stood before him, saluting as if he were someone of great importance. He wanted to believe this was a dream, but the pain in his body and the cold crystal beneath him told him it was real. The chamber door opened again. This time the sound was heavier, deeper, as if the very air bowed before whoever was about to step inside. The guards straightened, the soldiers tightened their ranks. The child beside him gripped his hand even harder, her glowing eyes locked on the doorway. From the shadows a figure entered. His presence filled the room before his body did. He wore armor unlike any the man had seen, darker than night yet lined with threads of gold light that pulsed like a heartbeat. His helmet was shaped like the face of a predator, sharp and unyielding. Every soldier lowered their head in respect as he walked forward. The human's chest tightened. This was no ordinary commander. This was someone higher, someone who carried the weight of entire armies on his shoulders. The man had survived fights in alleys, wars of survival on Earth, but nothing compared to the authority that radiated from this figure. The commander stopped only a few feet away, his glowing eyes locked onto the humans. For a long moment nothing was said, only the hum of alien machines and the faint sound of rain beyond the walls filled the silence. Then the commander spoke. His voice was low but powerful, like thunder held tightly in a clenched fist. The words were alien, sharp and cutting. The man could not understand them, but the weight of each sound pressed against his chest like a heavy hand. The child stepped forward, her voice clear though it trembled. She translated quickly, her eyes never leaving the commander's face. He says, "The soldiers are not here to guard me," she whispered. "They are here to guard you." The man froze. The words struck him harder than the blades that had pierced his body. He pointed to himself, his voice rough. "Me." The child nodded, her glowing hair shimmering under the chamber lights. Her hand shook as she added, "They call you shield bearer." The man's throat tightened. He wanted to deny it, to laugh at it. He was no shield bearer, no leader. He was just a human who had acted on instinct. But the commander stepped closer, his towering form casting a shadow over him. With slow, deliberate motion, the commander drew his weapon. It was not a simple blade. It was long, elegant, its edge glowing with light. Every soldier in the room shifted, as if the act itself carried great meaning. The human's breath caught. Was this a threat? Was this how it ended? But instead of striking, the commander lowered the blade, holding it across his chest. He bowed his head slightly, and then, like a rolling wave, every soldier followed, lowering their weapons, their heads bent in perfect respect. The man could hardly breathe. The chamber glowed brighter. The air seemed to thrum with energy. Guy. He had been stabbed 8 times and left for dead, but now he stood in the presence of warriors who treated him like a figure of legend. The commander spoke again, his words longer, stronger. The child translated in pieces, her voice rising with disbelief even as she spoke them. He says, "You are chosen by the code of their ancestors." He says, "No alien warrior has ever taken blades for one of their kind like you did." He says, "The blood you shed has bound you to their honor." The man's stomach turned. He had not asked for this. He had not chosen this. Yet the soldiers around him looked at him with fire in their eyes, as if his sacrifice had awakened something long forgotten in their hearts. Suddenly the door burst open again. Another soldier ran in, his armor scorched, his breathing heavy. He spoke quickly, his voice urgent. The commander stiffened, his glowing eyes narrowing. The child's face went pale. She turned to the human, whispering in fear, "They know you live. The enemies. They are coming." The chamber trembled as distant echoes shook the air. The man realized what was happening. Whoever had tried to kill the child had now learned he had survived, and they would not stop until both of them were erased. The commander lifted his glowing blade high, his voice booming like thunder. The soldiers roared in unison, the sound shaking the walls. Their salute had ended. Their war had just begun. The man sat frozen, his mind torn between disbelief and dread. He had been a nobody, a wanderer lost among the stars, and now alien armies were ready to fight in his name. For the first time, he understood the truth. This was not just survival anymore. This was destiny. The chamber shook with the roar of soldiers preparing for battle. Their boots struck the crystal floor like rolling thunder. Their glowing eyes burned with fire. Yet the human sat still, his heart pounding, his mind lost between fear and disbelief. Why him? Why were these alien warriors bowing to a man who had been nothing but a drifter? He had saved a child, yes, but that did not make him a leader, not a commander, not someone worthy of armies. The child stood beside him, her small frame trembling though she tried to look strong. Her glowing blue skin shimmered under the crystal lights. Her wide eyes met his, and for a moment he saw not just a child, but someone carrying a weight far too great for her years. The commander raised his hand and the noise stopped instantly. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. The air felt charged, every soldier waiting, every eye turned toward the human. The commander began to speak. His deep voice echoed through the chamber. His words were sharp, powerful, heavy with meaning. The child translated quickly, her voice shaking as she tried to keep up. He says, The blades you took were not only for me, she whispered. He says I am not just a child, I am heir to the crown of the stars. The human's eyes widened. He stared at her in disbelief. His body froze. His thoughts stumbled. He had not just saved a child. He had saved the daughter of a dynasty, a bloodline that commanded entire star systems. The commander continued, his glowing eyes fixed on the human. The child translated again, her voice breaking under the weight of the words. He says, by giving your blood to save me, you have bound yourself to the destiny of my people. He says the code of their ancestors declares you a shield bearer, a protector chosen not by birth, but by sacrifice. The human's chest tightened. He shook his head. No, he whispered. I never asked for this. His voice cracked. His hands trembled. He was no chosen one. He was no protector of dynasties. He was just a man who could not watch a child die. But the commander's eyes burned brighter. He raised his blade high. The soldiers pounded their fists against their armor in unison. Their voices rose in a single chant. A word repeated again and Giesung. Again the child looked at him with tears in her glowing eyes. They are calling you shield bearer, she said softly. They will follow you now. The man's heart raced. His mind screamed. He did not want this. Yet deep inside something stirred, a memory of the alley, of his body shielding hers, of the blades that tore into him. He had thought it was the end, but maybe it was only the beginning. Suddenly, the soldier who had rushed in earlier spoke again, his voice urgent, his armor scarred from battle. The commander turned sharply. The child's face grew pale. They are here, she whispered. The assassins, the ones who tried to kill me. They know you live. They are coming now. The chamber lights flickered. The machines hummed louder. The sound of distant explosions echoed from beyond the walls. The city outside was no longer silent. It was under siege. The commander barked orders. Soldiers moved instantly, forming ranks around the human and the child. Their weapons glowed with energy, their armor locked tight. The floor trembled as more warriors entered the chamber. The human stood slowly, his body still weak but his mind burning with fire. He had no armor, no weapon, nothing but his will. Yet as the soldiers saluted him again, as the child looked up at him with hope and fear, he felt something inside shift. He could not walk away now. He had become part of this, whether he wanted it or not. The commander stepped close, his towering frame casting a heavy shadow. He spoke again, his words slow and final. The child's voice cracked as she translated. He says, the galaxy is watching now. He says your choice will decide if we live or if we fall. The man swallowed hard. His heart thundered in his chest. He looked at the child clutching his hand, at the soldiers who would fight and die beside him, at the commander who bowed his head in respect. For the first time, he understood his act of sacrifice had not ended in that alley. It had only lit the first spark of something far greater. And in the silence that followed as the city trembled with the approach of enemies, the human made his choice. He would not run. He would not hide. He would stand. The city outside roared with chaos. Explosions lit the sky in flashes of red and white. The rain fell heavier, carrying the smoke and ash through the streets. The chamber walls trembled with each strike. The enemy was here. The commander's voice boomed across the chamber. Soldiers moved like a living machine, their armor locking into place, their weapons glowing with raw energy. They formed tight ranks around the human and the child. The sound of their boots against the crystal floor was like thunder. The human clenched his fists. His chest burned with unease. He had survived death once, but now it felt like death was walking straight toward him again. He looked at the child. Her small face was pale, but her glowing eyes never left him. She held his hand tightly, as if he were the only wall between her and the storm. The commander pointed his glowing blade toward the chamber doors. His words were sharp, commanding. The child quickly translated, her voice trembling but steady. He says the enemy is inside the city. He says they are coming for me. And for you. The human's jaw tightened. He was no warrior, no trained fighter like these soldiers, yet the weight of every eye in the room pressed on him. They looked at him not as a man, but as shield bearer. And deep inside, he knew he could not run. The doors burst open with a crash. A wave of armored assassins poured in, their armor black as void, their eyes glowing crimson, their blades and weapons hummed with deadly energy. They moved fast without hesitation. The commander roared. His soldiers surged forward. The chamber erupted into chaos. Sparks lit the air. The clash of blades filled the room. The human felt the shockwave of battle press against him. One assassin, broke through the line, his blade aimed straight for the child. The human reacted instantly. His body moved before his mind. He threw himself in front of her, his arm catching the blow. Pain tore through him, his blood spilling once more, but he did not fall. Not this time, the assassin growled, his crimson eyes burning. The human grabbed the wrist holding the blade, twisting with all the strength he had. The weapon slipped free. The assassin staggered, shocked by the raw force of a man who should already be dead. The soldiers roared in response. Their shield-bearer was fighting. Their fire grew brighter. Their blades struck harder. The commander's voice thundered through the chamber. He barked an order, and the soldiers shifted their formation. They surrounded the human and the child in a moving shield, blades outward, pushing the enemy back step by step. But the assassins were relentless. More poured into the chamber, their crimson eyes locked on the child. The human's heart pounded. He could see their intent. They would not stop until she was gone. He looked at the child, her eyes wide with terror, and yet she whispered, "Don't let go." The human's body screamed with pain, his wounds fresh again, his muscles burning. But his grip tightened around her small hand. He would not let go. Not now. Not ever. The assassins howled, their weapons crashing against the soldiers' shields. The air burned with sparks and smoke. The ground trembled with every strike, and then, in the heart of the storm, the human made his choice. He snatched a fallen alien blade from the floor. Its edge glowed with strange energy that vibrated through his bones. He had never held such a weapon, but instinct guided his hands. The next assassin lunged. The human swung. The glowing blade tore through armor, dropping the enemy to the ground. The soldiers cheered, their voices rising above the chaos. The commander shouted once more, his glowing eyes locked on the human. His words came heavy, filled with fire. The child gasps. Ped, as she translated quickly, he says, "Fight as shield-bearer and they will never touch us." The human's chest rose and fell with fire. He raised the blade high, his voice rough but strong. "Then we fight." The chamber shook as the battle raged on. Alien soldiers fought with precision. Assassins fell one by one. Yet still they came, wave after wave. The enemy's numbers seemed endless, but something had changed. The man who had once been nothing but a wanderer was no longer standing behind the shield. He was standing at the front, blade in hand, fighting beside them. Each strike he made, each wound he took, each roar of defiance, it lit something inside the soldiers. Their faith in him grew like wildfire. They did not see a human anymore. They saw a shield-bearer. The assassins faltered. Their attacks grew desperate. Their crimson eyes flickered with doubt. For every strike they landed, the man refused to fall. For every wound, he rose again, his body broken, his spirit unshaken. The commander raised his golden blade high. His voice thundered like a storm. The soldiers roared in answer. Their formation tightened. Their power surged. And with one final push, they drove the assassins back through the broken doors. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of sparks and the heavy breaths of warriors. The floor was littered with the fallen, smoke still rising from their armor. The human stood in the center, blood running down his arm, his chest heaving, his blade still glowing in his hand. The child stood behind him, her small face shining with tears and awe. The soldiers lowered their heads, every single one. The commander bowed his head too. His voice echoed across the chamber as the child whispered the words. He says, "You are no longer only human. You are shield-bearer, protector of the air, chosen by blood and battle." The human tightened his grip on the blade, his body weak, but his heart stronger than ever. He knew the truth now. The enemy would not stop. The war had only begun. The chamber was filled with smoke and the smell of burning metal. The bodies of assassins lay scattered, their crimson eyes dimmed forever. The human stood in the center, his chest rising and falling like a drum of war. His arm bled, his wounds screamed, but his grip on the glowing alien blade never loosened. The commander stepped forward, his golden blade shining with power. His voice thundered, his words rolling through the chamber like fire. The child's soft voice translated quickly, trembling yet clear. He says this fight was only the beginning. He says the real battle is out there, in the city. The enemy will burn everything until you and I are dead. The human's jaw tightened. He looked at the child clutching his torn hoodie, her eyes wide with fear but burning with hope. He looked at the soldiers kneeling before him, their armor cracked, but their spirit unbroken. He could not turn away now. "Then we fight out there," he said, his voice raw. "We end this." The commander's eyes glowed brighter. He raised his blade high, and every soldier slammed their fist against their armor. The chamber shook with their roar. They were ready. The doors opened again, but this time not to assassins. They opened to the burning streets of the alien city. Neon lights flickered against shattered walls. Fire roared in the distance. The rain hissed as it hit molten metal. The city was no longer just a place of shadows. It was a battlefield. The soldiers marched forward, their formation tight, their weapons glowing. The commander walked at the front, his golden blade cutting the smoke. The human was placed at the heart of the army, the child holding his hand. But as the streets shook with war, he moved to the front line, refusing to hide behind shields. The enemy was waiting. Hundreds of assassins poured from the alleys, their armor black as night, their crimson eyes burning like fire. They carried weapons that hissed with energy, and their voices rose in a haunting chant. They wanted blood. The commander roared. The soldiers charged. The battle exploded. The clash of blades rang out like thunder. Sparks lit the streets like stars. Energy blasts tore through the air, shaking the ground. The human fought in the storm. His body moved with instinct, his glowing blade slashing through armor. His heart burned with fury. For every soldier who fell, he struck harder. For every assassin that lunged for the child, he stepped in their path. His wounds reopened, blood soaking his torn clothes. But still he stood. His voice rose in a roar that echoed across the burning city. The assassins faltered. Their crimson eyes flickered with fear. For the first time they faced a human who did not break, who did not fall. The commander fought beside him, golden blade flashing like lightning. Together they cut through wave after wave. Soldiers around them roared louder, their courage growing with every strike the shield-bearer made. But then the ground trembled. A shadow moved above the smoke. The human lifted his eyes, his breath caught. From the skies descended massive warships, black as void, their engines roaring like monsters. They filled the heavens, blotting out the neon glow of the city. Their cannons lit with fire. The child gasped, her voice breaking. They brought the fleet. The first strike came like a star falling. A blast of red energy struck a tower, shattering it to dust. The shockwave sent soldiers crashing to the ground. The city screamed with fire and chaos. The commander shouted orders. Soldiers spread, forming shields to cover civilians running through the streets. The human grabbed the child, pulling her behind him as debris rained from the sky. "We cannot hold against ships," the child whispered, tears glowing on her face. Human clenched his blade tighter, his voice low but firm. "Then we take the fight to them." The commander turned his glowing eyes toward him. For the first time, a faint smile touched his face. He lifted his golden blade toward the sky. His words echoed like thunder. The child translated, her voice strong despite her fear. "He says the shield-bearer speaks with the fire of a king." The soldiers roared. Their voices rose so loud it shook the burning towers. They would follow him. They would follow this human who had risen from death. The human stepped forward, his body trembling, his heart blazing. The assassins regrouped, the ships above glowed brighter. The city shook as the war reached its peak. He had once been a wanderer, a nobody lost among stars, but now the galaxy's eyes were turning toward him, and as the flames of war swallowed the night, he raised his glowing blade high and shouted with all the strength left in him, "This is where we stand." The city burned. The night sky glowed red with fire and the shadow of warships above. The streets shook with the clash of soldiers and assassins. The human stood at the front, his blade glowing, his body bleeding, but his spirit stronger than ever. The commander fought beside him, golden blade flashing like lightning. The alien child clung to his torn hoodie, her glowing eyes wide with fear but filled with hope. The soldiers roared his name, shield-bearer. Each time he struck, their voices rising like thunder. But the enemy was not done. From the warships above, heavy cannons charged with fire. The ground trembled as massive blasts fell from the sky. Buildings shattered, Towers collapsed into dust. The soldiers shielded civilians with their bodies, but the storm of destruction was endless. The human looked up, his chest heaving. His mind screamed that they could not win against ships that blotted out the heavens. Yet he refused to kneel. He refused to give in. He turned to the commander, his voice raw. "We strike them where it hurts." The commander's gala. Owing eyes burned brighter. He nodded slowly. His voice rolled across the battlefield like thunder. The child translated quickly, her voice strong. "He says the shield-bearer has chosen, and so the army will follow." The soldiers rallied, their formation shifted. They fought not to defend the streets anymore, but to carve a path straight toward the enemy's heart. The assassins surged, desperate to stop them. Their crimson eyes glowed with fury. They threw themselves at the shield-bearer, but he cut them down with fire in his heart. Each strike of his blade was heavier, each roar of his voice louder. The soldiers fought harder, their spirits ignited by his defiance. The enemy faltered, their discipline broke. Fear began to creep into their crimson eyes. They were fighting not just an army now, they were fighting a legend being born before them. At last the path opened. Beyond the fire and smoke, the warships loomed closer, their cannons glowing, their engines roaring. The human's chest ached, his body weak, but he lifted his blade high. His voice rang through the battlefield. "We end this now." The soldiers roared in answer. The commander raised his golden blade. The child's small voice echoed through the chaos. "He says the galaxy will remember this night." The battle surged forward. Soldiers stormed the landing zones. Enemy ranks shattered under the weight of their charge. The assassins screamed, but their lines collapsed. The human led from the front, his blade striking through armor, his blood staining the ground. Yet still he fought, refusing to fall. The warships above shifted, their cannons turned, preparing to wipe the battlefield clean. But before they could strike, the commander lifted his golden blade to the sky. His voice thundered with ancient power, and the soldiers chanted, their voices like a storm. The air cracked with energy. A surge of light erupted from the soldiers, their armor glowing as if the ancestors themselves had risen. They know. Human felt it burning through him, filling his veins with fire. His blade glowed brighter, brighter than the storm itself. He charged forward, the commander beside him, the soldiers behind him. The assassins scattered like shadows before the dawn. The warships trembled as the surge of light struck them, their cannons bursting apart, their engines failing. The sky shook with explosions, the fire raining down like falling stars. The enemy broke, their fleet tore itself apart, their soldiers fled. The crimson eyes of their assassins dimmed as they scattered into the night. Silence fell over the battlefield. The smoke curled upward, the fire burned low. The streets were lined with broken armor and shattered weapons. The soldiers stood in ranks, their glowing eyes fixed on the human. The commander stepped forward, lowering his golden blade. He bent his knee, his voice rolled through the ruins. The child translated softly, her eyes shining with tears. "He says the galaxy has a new protector. He says you are not only shield-bearer, you are now written into the stars." The soldiers knelt as one, their blades lowered, their voices rose in a single chant. The human's chest burned, his throat tightened. He had never asked for this. He had never sought it. But in that moment he understood. He was no longer just a man who shielded a child. He was the bridge between worlds, the spark of unity, the fire that even death could not put out. The alien child looked up at him, her small hand still holding his, her voice soft but strong. "You saved me. And now, you saved us all." The human lowered his blade, his breath heavy, his wounds deep. Yet his heart was steady. For the first time in his life, he felt not lost but found. As the dawn broke across the smoking city, the galaxy itself seemed to shift. Word of the shield-bearer would travel beyond this world, to the farthest saint. Ours enemies would rise, wars would come, but his name would be carried in every whisper. And in the silence that followed, with soldiers kneeling and the child by his side, the human knew the truth. One act of sacrifice had changed everything, and the galaxy would never be the same again.